Capital Improvement Project's second quarter report for fiscal year 2013.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmer. You don't look like Pat Kelly. No. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. Yes, my name is Joshua Hagmark. I'm a principal civil engineer in Public Works Engineering Division. Got a presentation for you today to kind of update you on what we've been up to and what we've completed over the last 2 quarters. As part of my presentation today, we'll be recapping what we've been up to. We'll also talk about a couple projects that are currently in construction. And then I have with me John Iwaziak today. He'll be talking about some major efforts that we're working on in design and giving a status update. At the end of our presentation, we've been working with City TV, and they have put together another excellent video highlighting the Conejo Road repair project. And so we'll have that at the end of our presentation as well. So if there's no questions, I'll get right into it. So in the first quarter, we've completed 9 projects, totaling just over $8 million worth of work. I'm just going to talk about a few of these. The ARA Road overlays, that's the American Recovery and Reinvestment. That project had $1.5 million in federal grant funding and much needed for our streets program. So that project came to a wrap up in the first quarter of the year. The wastewater main rehabilitation, fiscal year 2011. The West Cabrillo Brick crosswalk maintenance and repair. The Helena parking lot development. The Lower West Downtown street lighting, phase 1. I just want to highlight that one. That was a neighborhood-driven need that we were able to meet using RDA fundings and a very successful project. And that included the area between Ortega and 101, and north and south, and east and west. It was Chapala to 101. Another great project using RDA money. And then the structure upgrades for parking structures 2, 9, 10 that also had RDA funding involved, and did some much needed improvements to the parking structures to improve the life safety of those structures. Airport short-term parking kiosk, the water main replacement fiscal year 2009-10. That was about 2 miles of water main in following council's guidelines of 1% of the water system a year. And then the Carrillo sidewalk infill Milpas to Nopal. In the second quarter, again, 9 projects were completed, and it was just over $8 million worth of projects. They included the launch ramp boating trails. That was a DBA loan project in which we were able to install another dock and ramp associated with small craft such as kayaks and small dinghies and things like that. Zone 6 pavement prep, the sewer main point repairs, fiscal year 2012, Mission Creek Fish Passage at Talent Road, the West Side CDBG sidewalk infill and access ramp project, the Lower Mesa Lane stairs replacement, the Escondido Bothene pump station rehabilitation, the Conejo Road repairs and sewer improvements for fiscal year 2012, and the Mission Creek Fish Passage at Caltrans Channel Phase 1. As you can see, this is the kind of mapped all of the projects that were completed in the first 2 quarters. Total project cost of $17 million for all these projects. And I know this is kind of hard for everyone to see, but the point I kind of wanted to make with this slide is that there is work going on all over the city. Since we were having a presentation at the end, I just wanted to quickly talk about this job. So this was the Conejo Road repairs and sewer improvements. And as many may be aware, there is a ongoing landslide, and not much you can do to stop this landslide. But over the years, the road has in places moved out of the city's right-of-way and has settled to a point where the road was so steep, emergency vehicles couldn't get access up this road. And so the city kicked off a project working very closely with the residents to move the road back into the right-of-way. And as part of that project, there's quite a few things we did to try and make sure we can get as much rainwater into the storm drain system and out of there. We also moved a big portion of the sewer main out of this area. So at least 35 homes now do not drain through this area anymore. The sewage has been moved away from the slide area. Another project I wanted to highlight that was completed was the Mission Creek Fish Passage at Caltrans Channel. This is the first phase. The second phase actually is coming to you next week for consideration of award of construction. And this was, I think, around a quarter-mile. And I think the highlight in this is it's a $1.5 million job. $1 million of it was provided by Fish and Game to increase the breeding area for the native steelhead. And so this will allow them to get further upstream in the Mission Creek corridor. Currently, there are 20 construction projects in progress for a total value of $42 million. And I'm going to highlight 5 of those projects. The Anacapa-Carrillo intersection, that was supposed to come before you today for a discussion, but basically this is a safety improvement project. This is one of the busiest intersections in the city, and there are quite a few things being done in the access ramps and lighting to try and cut down on vehicular incidents and pedestrian accidents that occur in that intersection. This project is supposed to wrap up at the end of March. This is the community development block grant sidewalks access ramps project. And this year they were able to do 5 intersections, 11 ramps, and that list is prioritized by need. And I know the ACTS committee chimes in on that. And this project was completed this year. The Safe Routes to School Modoc Portezuelo intersection improvements. This is one of those right near La Cumbre Junior High. The crossing distance before this project was over 100 feet for pedestrians crossing this roadway. The intersection was brought to more of a 90-degree, and the distance was shortened to just over 40 feet, and trying to cut down on any type of pedestrian vehicular accidents there. City worked really closely with La Cumbre Junior High to make sure that project was a success. And then this last one I was personally involved in, moving quickly to, we had a failure of one of the supports for this sewer crossing. It's up near the Rattlesnake Creek Trailhead. And it was right around Christmas. We put together a quick design and got an emergency approval to get going. And we'll be coming back to council on March 19th for a discussion and approval. And then this is the last, we'll be wrapping up the Marina One, the construction here in March. And this was a project that was initiated in 2010 and multiple phases to it. And so these are we're wrapping up the L dock is what it's called, and it's one of the last fingers on Marina One. And that will complete the major upgrades to the Marina One that have been proposed. So that completes my presentation, and if there's not any questions, I'm going to turn it over to John Owasiak to give you guys an update on some major design efforts.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Where is the moving of the dispatch center at this point? With the preamble that I think that most of us would be in agreement that that's our topmost important project. So I think it's something that we should be paying very close attention to.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, we will be coming to council on the 12th with a contract for design to get that element of work going again. After we lost funding with the RDA, we were kind of lost for how to fund that, and been working closely with Paul Casey here to try and identify some funding sources, and so we'll be bringing that item to you guys for discussion on the 12th.
Saying the 12th of March?
12th of March, yes.
Great, okay. And we'll have, of course, more detailed information at that time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. House?
This may be something you just want to get back to me later on, but a constituent asked me about the Anacapa-Carrillo intersection project, and in her mind, she was surprised to find that we're not providing right-hand or left-hand turn movement signal coming from Carrillo to Anacapa going westbound, and it was a feeling, it's a left-hand turn there going down that would take you down Anacapa, that traffic backup was a cause of issues and operational problems there, and she was surprised to find that wasn't included. Maybe you want to just unless you happen to know an answer about that right now, you might want to just get back to me later so I can get back and answer her. And I know this is going to come back for an add of additional funding for that on a future agenda. Maybe it could be then, but we should have an answer for the public that's interested in that.
Yes, thanks, Councilmember House. Yeah, I think when we come back in the next week or two with that report, I think we'll plan on addressing that question as well for you.
Yeah, she said she thought it was, since she walks around town a lot, she's not a motorist at all, but she says she's seen lots of close calls and things. She thought that would have alleviated it, but thank you very much.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hagmark, I wonder, you touched on it briefly on a couple of projects we have in our CAR, but as we go through these projects, could you just kind of briefly give funding sources so that the public gets a feel for where a lot of this comes from? Thank you.
Sure, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse. In the first 2 quarters of the year, almost $3 million was provided by grants for these projects, and those projects included the Mission Creek Fish Patches, that was $1 million. The Lower Mesa Lane Steps had grant money. Sidewalk infill had grant funds, and the Ara Road overlay included grant funds for a total of just shy of $3 million. Is there any other specific ones that you wanted to go over?
No, I just have gotten a number of questions lately from the public, and a lot of times when they see the gross number, of course, everything is included in it, but whether it's, something that comes from Measure A, General Fund, grants, other types of matching funds or whatever, I think it's helpful for us to make that public information, or it is public information, but just to mention it as we're doing our presentation, if that's okay with you guys. Thank you.
So, for example, the Caltrans channel, it was $1 million grant funding, but the other part was Measure B funds, not general fund. So maybe a slide of where the money came from, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly.
Okay. Mr. House?
I'll just pile on here just a little, because you've heard me over and again when we've had the reports on our capital projects, try to draw attention to the fact that one of the key aspects of the work product of our staff has been to be alert to the opportunities to multiply the value of our local funds by applying for, in a timely way, in a very competent way, federal and state grants and other sources of funding that has really truly magnified what our local public has been paying in their local taxes. And I agree with Mr. Rouse, and I really would like that when we have these kinds of reports, we do the pie chart or whatever it is that begins to really appreciate and acknowledge our staff for having taken that effort. Sometimes those things could just go by the way. We just miss an opportunity. But I guess I feel very much glad that you guys are on top of it and you're continuing to get us these additional funds so that we can keep doing this. We wouldn't be able to afford this just on our own dime. We just couldn't do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember House, I do have colleagues that work for the City of Ventura, and just talking to them, and I don't think they've been as successful as we have with pulling in grants and going after grants. Particularly, they've been kind of frustrated with how little they're able to do, not being able to go after some of those grants. And I think we've been very successful at many parts of this organization for going after and being able to leverage our money, particularly the bridge program, I think is a star case of that, where we've been able to, in some cases, 100% coverage of our bridges because of federal grants, and in other places, we're coming up with 12% matching funds. So I think we've been very successful. And the Public Works Director, Ms. Anderson, wanted to point out that in this first 2 quarters, a total of $10,000 was spent of general fund money. So there really wasn't any general fund contribution to speak of in the $17 million total for the first 2 quarters of the year.
That's a significant number, yeah.
Yeah, the point has to be made that the money came from us anyway. I mean, it was in our federal taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, that we're paying, and it's out there. It's just the question is, do we get a chance to draw attention to it and become a magnet for it to use for the things that we really do need? And again, with redevelopment agency going away, there's downtown type projects and things that, those bridges for the creeks are critically important. But anyway, thank you very much.
Mr. Iwaziak.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor. John Wasiak, Principal Civil Engineer with Public Works, and I have the design component of the presentation, and we have approximately 32 projects in design managed by engineering, and The total an estimated $91 million and change. And of the 32 projects, 8 of them are our bridge projects, and they are primarily funded by federal bridge grants. And those 8 bridge projects that are currently in design total approximately $61 million of that $91 million, to keep that number in perspective. So it's a large amount of grant funding for us. So I have 3 projects that I'd like to highlight for you, and one is the Mission Creek Concrete Fish Channel Passage and Repair and Enhancement. It's the Phase 2 and final phase. In your Council General report, we had a $4.2 million number there, but this number is now a $3.46 million number as a result of the excellent bids that we have received for this project. And regarding the funding, it is, again, major grant fund contributions to this project, $775,000 from the California Wildlife Conservation Board, $300,000 state coastal conservancy grant, and then we have Creeks Capital Fund picking up some of the tab and some of the reserves. And this Council General report will be coming to you next week for approval for the construction contract. So there'll be more information for that, but I wanted to point out the difference between the number here on the slide and the number in their Council General report. Another thing is that there's the 2 phases are, the location of the Phase 1 was between Pedregosa and Los Olivos Street, which is about a quarter of a mile. This Phase 2 is between Canon Perdido and Valerio Street. And there's a portion in between that is it's a natural habitat between the two. And so this stretch of 3.9 miles will give spawning habitat for the steelhead trout, and that has been blocked for over 50 years. So it's a significant accomplishment for our steelhead trout. And so bids have been opened on January the 24th, and the award of construction contract going to council next week. And construction is estimated to begin in May. And again, there's no Phase 3 for this project that is planned. The next project is our Chapala-Yananali Bridge Replacement Project. This was a 100% grant fund. We do have some city contribution because we're taking the opportunity to underground some additional overhead utility lines with some of our remnant utility overhead funds that are available. So we're taking advantage of that, the opportunity, and working with the utility companies to underground as much in the vicinity that is reasonable and feasible for us to embellish the enhancement of this project. And so here's a rendering of the final product of the new bridge at the intersection. And plans are being finalized, and just today, this morning, we received approval from Caltrans to construct this project. So we'll be going out to bid very soon and getting bids in April, and then looking towards construction in the, bids in April, and then construction will begin in the May-June time period. Now, some of the utility work may begin because the utilities have to be getting out of the area in advance of the construction contractor moving in for the construction of the bridge. So you may see some activity here in this location in March, April timeframe in advance of the major construction. So construction scheduled to begin in June, and approximately a 9-month duration for this construction project. The next project is a Punta Gorda Street Bridge Replacement Project valued at approximately $3 million, and it includes some Sycamore Creek widening between Punta Gorda Street and Highway 101. Again, here's another view of the proposed project. And improvements to this section of Sycamore Creek will increase the storm conveyance from its approximate 1,400 cubic feet per second to approximately 3,000 cubic feet per second, so a significant increase in the channel capacity at this segment. And this project is funded primarily from a $2.7 million grant that was received from the U.S. Department of Housing Development, or HUD, as a competitive disaster recovery initiative grant. So we're very fortunate to get the grant funding for this bridge project. So the grant funding was for construction only, so the city funded the design portion of this project. So final design of this project is complete, and we have a March 19th council agenda report scheduled for the acquisition of the necessary temporary easements. We'll be going out to bid in March and then receipt of bids in April, and we're scheduled for construction in June of this year, with an approximate 1-year time period for the construction of this project. Next, we have the Conejo Road video. So with that, start it.
Since the late 1960s, the earth under the Conejo Road area has been on the move, especially in the winters corresponding with heavy rainfall. The results have not been good.
In March of 2011, there was significant landslide movement in this area that damaged Conejo Road. There was about 53 inches of movement in only 10 days, which caused us to have to close the road to through traffic and created a gap in the pavement.
City crews were able to temporarily repair the roadway, but because of years of ongoing landslide movement, the slope of Conejo Road exceeded the maximum allowed for emergency vehicle access. In March 2012, the city began to develop design plans for a more substantial repair of Conejo Road. City staff met with residents of the area to discuss the design and coordinate the construction. The roadway was regraded using geofoam, a lightweight foam fill that raised the elevation of Conejo Road to reduce the slope in order to meet fire department requirements.
The big benefit of using geofoam for this project is that it's much lighter than conventional fill, and because we were needing to use so much fill, we were concerned about adding mass to the landslide. So the geofoam allowed us to reduce the amount of weight that was being added to the landslide by about 650 tons, because the foam is about 1% of the weight of conventional fill material.
Similar to a puzzle, the large geofoam blocks had to be cut into perfectly sized pieces in order to fit the contour of the road. The blocks were then draped with a black geotextile fabric. The fabric encapsulates the blocks so that if the blocks shift as a result of landslide movement, the soil above the blocks does not migrate into the joints.
Although the geofoam is much lighter than conventional fill, it's just as strong as the conventional fill, which made it a great option for this project.
The 74-pound geofoam blocks are made from recycled materials and are themselves 100% recyclable.
One of the interesting parts about managing this project through design was getting to learn about the geofoam. It's never been used before in the city, and we weren't familiar with it, but our geotechnical subconsultant recommended it, and we were able to learn more about it and learn how it's been used for many, many years. Through the design process, we learned that geofoam has been used successfully throughout the state of California and throughout the entire country for very large road reconstruction projects, runway projects, and structural projects. So we felt confident that this was a good application for geofoam.
The total cost of design, construction, management, and inspection on this project was a little over $494,000.
For this project, the cost of using geofoam over conventional fill was slightly more. However, because of the benefit of being able to reduce the amount of weight being added to the landslide, that benefit outweighed the small extra cost. Also, less time was needed for construction because the foam blocks don't require compaction and are really easy to place without the use of heavy machinery.
In addition to the road repairs, the sewer service along Conejo Road was also improved.
This project had several benefits to the residents in the area. The sewer improvements that were done diverted the sewage flow of about 35 homes away from the sewer main that passes through the slide mass. That's a big benefit because that means more reliable sewer service, and it's also much less maintenance for city crews.
The 8-week project also addressed drainage issues.
There were also drainage improvements incorporated with this project that help divert runoff into the storm drain system and away from the slide mass. Reconstructing Conejo Road restored adequate slopes, so now there's full emergency access to this area, including all of the fire department's necessary rigs, which is important in this area.
The end result is a more stable road that improves access for residents of the area.
Inspection. So she has...
That concludes my portion on the design, but I would like to take the opportunity to talk to the council about some upcoming construction projects on the lower State Street area. Now, these projects that are highlighted as somewhat of a patchwork quilt here, but there seems to be some connect the dots theme that is working here as well. These are projects that are anticipated to go to construction or have the potential to go to construction in the next 3 years by 2016. And so it's a mixture of city public projects and private projects. So I'd like to walk you through them and give you a time frame and tell you what I know about them and what I don't know about them. But since it's going to be significantly impacting our lower State Street area in the not too distant future, we thought it was worthy of bringing it to the council's attention. So I'd like to start off with what we know, which I informed you of, the Chapala Bridge project. And it is, again, going to be starting construction soon. And so that kicks off the projects in this vicinity. Now, one of the next projects to begin would be the Lower Mission Creek Reach 1B project, which is shown here with the arrow, and that's a county flood control project for the Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Reach, and it is a segment between our Mason Street Bridge and our Chapala Street Bridge. So it's the reach in between those two bridges, and that project, the county is attempting to get that into construction by end of summer. And they would like to do a project a year. They're planning to do a project a year, a reach a year for the next 3 years. So 1B is slated for construction later this year, and then we have the reach 2A, which is the blue segment, which is the box culvert, which would be immediately adjacent to the Chapala Street Bridge. They're slated that for construction of summer of 2014. In addition to those reaches and the Chapala Bridge is our city Mason Street Bridge project, which will connect the dots again from the existing county flood control reach that was constructed near the Roma Santa Bridge downstream of Mason Street, and this city project will close the gap between the two county reach projects. And so this project is in final design. We recently got the HLC approval for the geometry, and now we're moving forward with final design and property acquisitions, and we are scheduled to start construction on Mason Street Bridge in the spring of 2014. Adjacent to these Bridge and Reach projects is the 16 West Mason, the Roma Santa Hotel project. It recently got unanimous approval at the Planning Commission, and they're moving forward with their final approvals and drawings to construct this project. Now, it's to be determined, as it's up to the developer as to when they would like to start construction. It could conceivably start as early as late summer or early fall. But it's a developer's project, and we'll see the timing of that. Had discussions with the Roma Santa family with what is scheduled to be happening adjacent to their hotel on both State and Mason Streets, which is the Entrada to Santa Barbara project. The Entrada project consists of several phases. The stage one would be the west side of the State Street improvements and the west Mason Street improvements, approximately $1 million worth of construction that is slated for construction in the very near future. Now, it's contingent upon the applicant signing the land development agreement, which is work in progress at this point, and then having the appropriate bonding in place so that the construction can start. This could conceivably start very soon in the next week or two. So we'll definitely be giving you an update of that as this moves along, but it's a contingent upon action by the developers, so that's why I can't give you a definitive date on that. So that's the first activity on the Entrada project that would occur. The second stage is the east half of the State Street improvements, and that is to be determined, as it is likely going to be tied to the substantial conformance determination that was associated with the Entrada Area A being the California hotel site, the Area B, and the Area C. So the on-site developments, the Entrada has recently gone through the HLC on some proposed changes to their on-sites. And so there is likely going to be a updated substantial conformance determination by which we would then set the timing of the east side State Street improvements. And then along with the on-sites is envisioned to have the stage 3 of the public improvements being the East Mason Street and the Helena Street improvements. That would coincide with the on-site improvements for areas, Entrada Area B and Entrada Area C. So it's a rather complex situation there, and it's contingent upon developer action.
Did you have a question at this point? Go ahead.
Madam Mayor. And that is that a, a concept review at HLC? Is that what the process is there?
My understanding is that they are proposing some substantial changes to the on-sites, and so
Probably that's more
would
Mr.
that be
Casey
considered
or
concept,
Mr. Wiley
Mr. Wiley?
question.
Would that be considered concept?
Well, Councilmember White, it's sort of just continuing HLC review. There's no disagreement, whether it's applicant, the HLC, the public, that ultimately they're going to need what we now call a design approval from the HLC for the project they now want to build. So regardless of what you call it, they're working towards a design approval from the HLC. Yeah.
Can I follow up on, since we're on that, and I think Mr. Francisco also has a question. Since we're on the topic of the Entrada, what the HLC is reviewing is design changes to areas C and B and perhaps A, but mostly C. But the permits about other parts of the whole project, the street improvements, the planning piece, how many units, all the planning permits, that is separate and apart from, as I understand it, from what HLC is reviewing. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Mayor. And of course, it's really not that unusual for a development project, even a small one or a large one like this, to move forward with their public improvements first off. That's not uncommon. That they know that they need to do that in order to completely build a development project. So that's what Entrada is doing. I suppose you could say at this point they're somewhat at risk. It's our anticipation they'll start work on the, let me get this right, the east side of State Street.
West side.
West side of State. Yes, it's west side of State Street within the next week or two. So they're somewhat at risk in moving forward with that without having a substantial conformance determination from the city administrator in this case, and without having the final design approval from the HLC. But they're willing to do that. That's kind of the nature of this evolving project. So,
Okay.
does that answer your question?
Yes. Mr. Francisco?
I just wanted to mention, as liaison to the HLC heard a presentation from the developer, Mr. Rosenfeld, and his team a few weeks ago, presenting a fairly substantial redesign to Area C, and the HLC had considerable comment on those design changes. So this is an ongoing saga.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Wozniak, I don't know if this is graphically correct or not. I was looking at just the way the State Street goes up where it crosses Mason, and it appears to be a cutout or some kind of a curb cut on the north side of Mason Street. Is that? My understanding was that was going to move to like a right turn lane onto Mason, or is that just a preliminary graphic? It's not to be.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Ross, yeah, this is really schematic, and so what I believe that little jet out represents there is an existing city right-of-way which is being conveyed to the Entrada process through a owner participation agreement. So I wouldn't take that one as too literal.
Thank you.
Okay, I think you were halfway through all the different changes.
I'm getting there. So I want to go back to the flood control project because I mentioned 3 and I've shown 2. So the third one is actually north of the 101. It's Reach 3, and that is the third year project, which is immediately north of the 101. So that's the reaches. The first reach is Reach 1B, which is slated for this fall. Reach 2A, which is slated for next year, and then the following year would be Reach 3, which is north of the 101.
And there was one reach already, completed, right? towards Cabrillo Boulevard, where there's no color. Didn't flood control complete, that was right at Cabrillo.
We've got
and-
some completion of the, yes, that
No, I meant towards Cabrillo Boulevard.
1A towards Cabrillo, down
There.
here. Yes, this has been completed, that's
Right,
correct.
that's why it's not, so that's already happened.
So with the
done.
completion of these bridges and reaches, we would have the channel widening and bridge completion from the one-way south to the ocean within
Great.
a 3-year period.
Great, thank you.
All right. Carrying on in this vicinity is the Children's Museum. So this is city parcel that was formerly RDA property, which is the city is working with the state to retain this property, and it's part of the railroad property situation that the city is working to retain that property. So that's work in progress, but that is the site of the Children's Museum, and that's there's anticipated Children's Museum development move forward if the city retains the property. Also, another private development here is the Beacons building in the vicinity, the corner of Helena and Mason, and the developer owner has a application into the city for a tenant improvement, and so we have because they're in the coastal zone coming in for a coastal development permit, we would be able to acquire the public improvements along the property frontage, and so that would make Helena whole as we're getting the public improvements on the Entrada side of the street. We would be able to get public improvements on the Beacons building side of the street to the extent that we can. So that would be some more public improvements forthcoming. And then we have, of course, the Cabrillo Bridge, which has been is in real right-of-way acquisition stages. And our latest schedule is that the construction would start in September of 2014. And the areas shown in green are the areas that work would be occurring or staging or activity would be occurring. So again, fall or September of 2014 is the current schedule for that project to begin. And again, it's a grant fund project, approximately 88.5% grant funded with city match. And the duration of this project is approximately 2 years. So it's a significant term of construction for this project. And then finally, we have the Anacapa-Cabrillo intersection project, which is slated for construction in the fall of 2015. And it is part of we received Highway Safety Improvement Program grant funding for this and 3 other intersections in town. Derek Bailey has done a great job in acquiring some grant funding, and this is one of the intersections in which we'll benefit from grant funding, and we'll be coordinating it with the Cabrillo Bridge project such that the activities will be seamless to the public, and that the work will be ongoing and coordinated is what I'm trying to convey here. So that's yet another project, and so the multitude of projects in this vicinity in this relatively short period of time, an approximately 3-year period, will make a significant change to our Lower State Street vicinity. And we'd like to notify the public of this. We'd like to put out some public information to let people know that this is forthcoming. And we plan to do that initially when we do have the Entrada project kicking off. So we'd like to do a press release of the Entrada project and follow up with some public information with this regarding the planned work within the next 3 years, or potential work, because some of it is privately funded and privately driven. So with that, I conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't see any public speaker slips. It's a lot of coordination, so yeah, communication with the public is going to be key. There's also the Creeks Division is looking at Mission Creek and Laguna Creek down just down below that slide. So, but that's not slated till, do you have a timeline?
I'm sorry, I don't have a time frame. I'm not sure that that's been determined yet.
Okay. But obviously how that relates to the Cabrillo Bridge is going to be really important. You know, the estuary project, whatever. We haven't even seen designs. That's probably years in the waiting, right? So it'll be all done, and then we'll look at, okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much.